Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about something I've seen people ask, and I really don't think it should be a concern. People will routinely ask, hey, uh, you know, is it bad to eat too many omega-3s or too many polyunsaturated fats because they're anti-inflammatory? I'm concerned that the anti-inflammatory response from this is going to, interfere with my muscle growth. And look, I think where people lose the plot with some of this, and I'll get to that in a minute of why people have come up with that, but I've seen the same thing, even suggested even when I was doing a really high fruit diet for a while. Getting most of my calories from fruit, they're like, are you worried about that interfering with gains? I mean, it could be uh, too much anti-inflammatory response. It could be blunting training response. When I was hitting the best benches you guys have ever seen me hit, that's how I was eating and my bench was climbing. Granted, I was in a heavy carb surplus, but still, it was actually quite the opposite. I felt training recovery is good when I do those things, when I eat all these anti-inflammatory foods. And here's where I think we run into the problems with it. Is because we see certain things that blunt this in different research. People have this assumption that anything that reduces inflammation is a problem, and that's not the case. Particularly when it's in the form of really high quality whole foods that are fueling your nutrition, fueling your recovery, everything else. And I think here's where we get a little confused with that. There have been studies to where post-exercise, if large amounts of antioxidant supplements in concentrated form, what do we mean, like vitamin C or vitamin E, right? They noted in some studies that it blunted the training response from cardio, meaning your body didn't get all the adaptations from the workout. Okay, now you still burned calories, you still used energy, all of that stuff, but there was definitely a measurable blunted training response. In other words, people didn't get the endurance improvements and things in the muscular level from the cardio. They didn't appear to work if they did that. It reduced the effectiveness of the exercise or a training response. Now, we can extrapolate that and say, hey, maybe that is also the case with weightlifting. Maybe it will reduce that due to too quick of a large anti-inflammatory response. But that's not been proven. Number two, that was not from foods. That's never been really seen with foods. It was purely in the form of concentrated supplements, like a vitamin C powder, right? Things like that. And I think it's a little bit different when we're dealing with something that has a more robust cellular response, like resistance training, because there's going to be tissue trauma and other stuff that occurs. All right, so that's point number one. Then when we see the stuff like data showing that cold interferes, but people are saying, oh, it's not because of the anti-inflammatory part, guys. All right, that's not the point. In fact, the ability of cold to really and truly be anti-inflammatory is subject to debate. The problem is that it's a reduction in blood flow, and it pulls nutrients and things away from muscle tissue and tissues. So we know that cold can blunt training response. That's why the whole ice bath thing is absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous for people who are training. The people are like, well, what if you're really beat up? I'm like, there's better ways to cause your tissues to recover from being really beat up from playing a game of football or a MMA match than freezing yourself and creating that additional stress on your body. But the idea that that's necessarily anti-inflammatory, at least at the hormonal level, no. No, you're reducing blood flow, right? Reducing blood flow to the nerves too, so maybe you feel it less. To reduce swelling and things, right? So that's the thing. Like, we should not be icing injuries. You ice injuries to bring swelling down on, say, a broken bone or something, or a sprain on your way to the emergency room, right? So that the swelling doesn't become excessive. It does not, and I want to repeat, does not help the healing process. Okay? It is not part of helping the healing process to do that. If anything, it can slow it down. But that's oftentimes done to get swelling under control so doctors can get in there and get a better look at it. Possibly if they need an emergency corrective procedure, because the swelling itself can interfere with the ability to do that. Right? But that has nothing to do with anti-inflammatory foods in any way blunting training response. And here's the thing. You start looking at some of these things. A perfect example would be the polyunsaturated fats, because both omega-3 and omega-6 are now known to be anti-inflammatory. That is not really debated anymore. That was, again, the inflammatory response from omega-6 fats was an old hypothesis that had not been tested. And once it was tested later in the lab and we looked at it, it turned out to not really be the case. And it wasn't that we thought the omega-6s were anti-inflammatory, it's that we thought they would convert into a pro-inflammatory omega-6 called arachidonic acid. We thought the body would convert a lot of omega-6s to that, particularly because we've seen it more in rat studies, but it turns out in humans we convert very little of it. And the net effect is that omega-6 is actually somewhat anti-inflammatory in the body, just not as much as omega-3. But here's the thing with all those polyunsaturated fats. Again, I'm not talking about damaged ones. I'm talking in whole foods. I'm talking nuts and fish and things like that. Again, I am not talking about high temperature vegetable oils that have been refined and then bleached and then you're cooking it. That's not what we're talking about. Okay? We're talking about in the form of reasonably whole foods. So again, context, they're anti-inflammatory, but they all also promote better insulin sensitivity. Well, let's come back over, and even if you were worried that the mild anti-inflammatory response would slightly blunt that, anything that enhances insulin sensitivity in your muscle tissue is going to be very pro-anabolic. Okay, it's going to be pro-anabolic. Now, in a way, that's also somewhat anti-inflammatory. Why? Because inflammation in muscle tissue goes down real quick when it gets more nutrients and fuel. Okay, so being higher insulin sensitivity will shut more glucose, more insulin, more amino acids, everything into muscle tissue. So, I mean, if you really want to get technical, a lot of these foods like that enhance insulin sensitivity are going to downstream over time enhance muscle growth, right? They're going to enhance muscle growth, right? Anything that improves insulin sensitivity in your body is good for muscle growth. It's good for recovery from training. This is a good thing, right? And it's particularly more insulin sensitive muscle tissue is going to make you more resistant to gaining body fat. It's going to shift you in the direction of gaining muscle easier and gaining fat slower. That's always a good thing. So no, absolutely, I would not worry about these things. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.